I was working undercover in Burma when I first came up with the idea for these photographs. On every street corner, somebody is watching you. It's one of the world's most brutal military regimes, and the Burmese people have been under its rule for decades. It was just a few months after the Saffron Revolution, and I was documenting the places where the demonstrations had happened. I started to think about the people who had been arrested, the people who had now become political prisoners, arrested for demonstrations, peaceful actions, or something as simple as expressing an opinion. I travelled to the Thai-Burma border to meet former political prisoners who had fled the country and were now living in exile. They all told me the same thing, that whilst there were still political prisoners locked up in Burma, they could not feel free. I wanted to show this connection between the former political prisoner and the current political prisoner still inside. The idea came to me to use the palm of the hand, the Buddhist symbol for fearlessness. And the names they choose to write on their hands are their friends, their cellmates, or even their brothers and sisters who are still in prison today. So I started taking their portraits. This is Amin So, who was an undercover video journalist for the Democratic Voice of Burma. He was arrested in 1988, having taken part as a student in the mass uprisings and spent 4 years in prison. These guys working as video journalists inside the country are taking phenomenal risks. Knowing the impact of footage you've captured and smuggling it out of the country puts you in an incredibly dangerous position. On his hand is the name of one of his colleagues, a fellow reporter, Nguyen So Lin, caught in an internet cafe in Rangoon and sentenced to 13 years in prison. Many of those forced to flee from Burma are now in exile all around the world. In Tokyo, I met Moji. He was a member of the Tricolor student movement who provided security for Aung San Suu Kyi. He was arrested in 1989 with more than 40 colleagues just because they were members of the opposition party, and he spent 3 years in prison. The name on his hand is Thein Nguyen, an ordinary civilian arrested in 2008 just for being part of a group demonstrating during the Saffron Revolution. Then London, where I met Thein Lin, now a famous artist. He was arrested simply for being on a list of potential political activists, and he was sentenced to 7 years. The name on his hand is Zarganar, his close friend, and Burma's most popular comedian and artist. Zarganar is currently serving a 35-year sentence for helping survivors of Cyclone Nargis and talking to foreign journalists about the government's lack of action. The most dangerous part of this whole project are the trips back inside Burma. You never know what's around the corner. Do they know you're there? Are they following you? Have they let you in because they know who you are? But we all still take the risks because the message is too important. There were a couple of occasions when we filmed outside in broad daylight. The person who I'm meeting turns up, 5 seconds to take the photograph, walk away. Photographing U Win Tin for this project was incredibly important but dangerous. He was one of the founding members of the National League for Democracy and is Burma's most famous and prominent former political prisoner. He was arrested in 1989 and spent 19 years in prison, mostly in solitary confinement. The name on his hand is Burma's democracy icon, Aung San Suu Kyi. As the leader of the National League for Democracy, she has been detained for more than 14 of the last 20 years. These photos are demanding the unconditional release of all political prisoners. With Amnesty, we can take this demand to a global scale.
My father is one of the political prisoners who are serving 65 years and 6 months imprisonment in Burma.
I feel very emotional that I write my father's name down in my hand. It's really strange that, I want to show him that I'm taking action for the political prisoners, and including him, but I can't show it. And I really want to tell my father that these things I've been doing. As my father said, every human being deserves human rights.
Just simply writing the political prisoner's name on their hand can raise huge amount of awareness. So it is very important for the people in UK to take action and use the freedom which they have in their hand.
The person I've written on my hand is a man called Kun Kario. He's slightly older than me. He was peacefully campaigning, doing what we do, writing something on a wall or putting a poster up, and he's, I think, been sentenced to 37 years in jail. It's just so simple. All it takes is 10 minutes, is getting a pen, writing a name on your hand, and uploading a photo onto the Amnesty website. If enough people do it and just show that they're involved and that they care, it's going to have an effect.
By joining this campaign, you'll be adding your voice to that of the former political prisoners who have bravely taken part in this project, raising their hands in defiance of this brutal military regime. Amnesty will be taking the photographs I have taken and those that you take to a political summit where world leaders who have the most influence over Burma will be gathered. You'll be telling world leaders that it is not acceptable to remain silent on this issue. You'll be telling them that the time is now for them to act, to work harder to ensure the unconditional release of all political prisoners in Burma. You have freedom in your hands. Use it for Burma.